She never realized how deeply a single word could carry emotion until she tried to explain it to her Ukrainian friends. It happened on a quiet evening back in Kiev, the kind where winter pressed gently against the windows and everyone gathered indoors with tea and soft music playing in the background. She had just returned from months in the Philippines, and although her luggage was filled with clothes and souvenirs, the thing she carried most was something invisible: Filipino humor, Filipino warmth, and a strange emotional language called Hugot. At first, she didn't even notice it had changed her. It came out naturally, the way habits do when they're no longer foreign. Someone joked about love, about heartbreak, about disappointment, and she laughed, not loudly, but knowingly. Then she added a comment that made perfect sense to her. Her friends stared. They looked at her the way people do when they hear something that sounds poetic but confusing, like a sentence that feels emotional but doesn't quite translate. She smiled, assuming they'd get it in a second. They didn't. She tried again. Still nothing. That was the moment she realized Hugot doesn't survive translation. Back in the Philippines, Hugot jokes were everywhere. In jeepneys, in cafes, during karaoke nights, whispered between friends, shouted during laughter, casually dropped into conversations that had nothing to do with love, but somehow ended up there anyway. Hugot wasn't just a joke, it was emotional shorthand. It was pain disguised as humor, sincerity wrapped in sarcasm, heartbreak softened by laughter. But in Ukraine, jokes were different. Humor there was sharp, witty, sometimes dark, sometimes dry. People laughed at irony, absurdity, intelligence. Emotional vulnerability wasn't usually delivered as a punchline. Feelings were either private or serious. So when she casually joked, "That's okay, I'm already used to disappointment," and smiled the way Filipinos do when they say something sad but funny, her friends paused. One of them asked if she was okay. Another asked if she needed to talk. Someone else thought she was being dramatic. She laughed again, trying to explain. She said it was a joke. She said it was funny. She said it was Hugot. They asked what Hugot meant. That's when the struggle began. She tried explaining Hugot as emotional humor, but that wasn't enough. She said it was joking about pain, but that sounded unhealthy. She said it was laughing at heartbreak, but that sounded depressing. She said it was when something hurts, but you turn it into a joke so it doesn't hurt as much. Her friends listened politely, but their faces stayed puzzled. In Ukraine, pain wasn't usually laughed at. It was processed quietly, privately, or with seriousness. Making jokes about emotional wounds felt strange, even uncomfortable. Why laugh at something that hurt? Why joke about loneliness? Why smile while admitting sadness? She didn't have a good answer, because Hugot wasn't something you explained logically. It was something you felt. She remembered the Philippines. She remembered sitting on a plastic chair at a roadside eatery while rain poured hard enough to drown out traffic noise. Someone made a joke about being left on scene, and everyone laughed, not because it was light, but because it was true. Someone else followed with a joke about loving someone who didn't love them back, and the laughter grew louder, not mocking, but understanding. In those moments, nobody asked if anyone was okay. Nobody offered therapy. They laughed together, and somehow, that laughter made everything feel lighter. Hugot didn't deny pain. It acknowledged it openly, but gently. She tried telling her Ukrainian friends that Hugot was a form of emotional honesty, that Filipinos didn't pretend everything was perfect. They admitted sadness, but they refused to let it destroy them. Her friends nodded, but she could tell they still didn't fully understand. One of them joked back, trying to imitate her tone, making a dramatic comment about heartbreak. It sounded forced. The timing was wrong. The emotion didn't land. Everyone laughed, but not in the same way. She realized Hugot wasn't just words. It was rhythm, timing, cultural muscle memory. It came from growing up hearing elders joke about hardship, hearing parents laugh about sacrifice, hearing friends tease each other about love and loss without judgment. Filipinos didn't laugh because things were easy. They laughed because things were hard, and they survived anyway. Later that night, as the conversation drifted to relationships, one friend complained about dating fatigue. Without thinking, she said, "That's okay. Love always comes when you're already tired." She smiled softly. Silence followed. One friend asked, "Why would you joke about that?" She paused. In the Philippines, someone would have replied, "Exactly," and everyone would have laughed. Here, the room felt heavy. She realized something important then. Hugot jokes weren't meant to be explained. They were meant to be shared between people who understood emotional struggle as a collective experience. Filipinos didn't isolate pain. They communalized it. She missed that. In Ukraine, emotional conversations were often deep but contained. You talked seriously about problems or avoided them altogether. In the Philippines, you joked about pain so everyone knew they weren't alone. She tried again the next day, this time more carefully. She gathered her friends and told them stories instead of definitions. She talked about nights when Filipinos sang karaoke with voices cracking, not because they couldn't sing, but because they were singing their feelings out. She talked about jokes told during brownouts, laughter during floods, humor during heartbreak. She explained that Hugot jokes were a way to say, "I've been hurt too," not to seek pity, but to find connection. Something shifted. One friend admitted that maybe Ukrainians were too serious sometimes. Another said maybe laughing at pain wasn't weakness, but resilience. They still didn't fully get Hugot, but they started respecting it. That night, one of her friends made a small joke. It wasn't perfect, but it was gentle. It carried a hint of self-awareness. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't cruel, it was closer. She smiled, not because the joke was funny, but because the effort mattered. She realized then that Hugot had changed her. It softened her. It allowed her to acknowledge sadness without drowning in it. It taught her that vulnerability didn't always need silence or seriousness. Sometimes it needed laughter. As she lay in bed that night, she scrolled through her phone, watching Filipino videos filled with Hugot jokes. Short lines, simple words, heavy feelings made light. She felt warmth spread through her chest, the kind that came from understanding something deeply. Her Ukrainian friends might never fully understand Hugot, but she knew now. It wasn't about them understanding it. It was about her carrying it with her. And slowly, gently, letting it change the way she loved, joked, and lived, even in places where Hugot didn't exist yet. By the time spring arrived in Kyiv, she realized something unexpected had happened. Hugot had followed her home. It showed up in small moments, when she smiled at a sad song instead of skipping it, when she laughed quietly after an awkward silence, when she chose gentle humor instead of defensiveness during uncomfortable conversations. It had rewired something in her, and now, without meaning to, she was bringing it into spaces where it didn't naturally exist. Her Ukrainian friends noticed the change before she did. They said she spoke differently now, softer, more reflective, less sharp. They teased her about it at first, saying she'd come back too emotional, but there was no cruelty in it. Just curiosity. One afternoon, while sitting in a cafe near the river, a friend complained about being tired of dating. The usual conversation followed. Sarcastic jokes, practical advice, rational explanations about modern relationships. Then there was a pause, and she said it again. Something Hugot. Not dramatic, not heavy, just a quiet line about how people often give their best to the wrong timing. She didn't even smile when she said it. She just stirred her coffee. This time, nobody laughed immediately, but nobody looked confused either. One friend tilted her head and said, "That sounds sad, but kind of true." Another nodded slowly. It wasn't laughter, but it wasn't rejection. That was new. She realized Hugot didn't always need to land as humor. Sometimes it landed as honesty. Filipinos used it to make pain lighter, but underneath, it was still truth. And truth could travel across cultures more easily than jokes. She began experimenting, not consciously, but instinctively. She stopped explaining Hugot as a concept. She simply lived it. When someone teased her, she teased back without malice. When someone talked about heartbreak, she didn't rush to fix it or analyze it. She listened, then offered a line that acknowledged the feeling without exaggerating it. Her friends started responding differently. They didn't always laugh, but they paused. They reflected. They softened. One evening, after a long conversation about work stress and life pressure, one of her friends said something that surprised her. "I think I get it now," she said. "It's like, you're not making fun of the pain. You're making peace with it." That sentence stayed with her, because that was it. Hugot wasn't self-pity. It wasn't drama. It wasn't sadness disguised as humor. It was emotional acceptance with a smile. In Ukraine, emotions were often treated like problems to be solved. In the Philippines, emotions were treated like companions. You acknowledged them, joked with them, lived alongside them. She missed that approach more than she realized. As weeks passed, her friends began trying on Hugot themselves, not copying Filipino jokes, but expressing vulnerability more openly. Someone joked about always being strong for everyone else. Someone laughed about loving people who never noticed. Someone admitted loneliness without shame. The jokes weren't funny in the traditional sense, but they felt lighter afterward. One night during a small gathering, someone joked about being emotionally available but chronically unlucky. Everyone laughed, not loudly, but warmly. She felt it then. That feeling. The same one she felt in the Philippines when laughter didn't erase pain, but made it bearable. She didn't say anything. She just smiled. At home, alone, she thought about how strange it was that a culture so far away had changed the way she processed emotions. Filipino humor didn't ask people to hide sadness or turn it into spectacle. It simply said, "We've all been there." That sense of shared humanity was something she hadn't realized she was missing. She began writing again, small reflections, short lines that sounded like jokes but felt like confessions. She didn't call them Hugot. She didn't label them. She just wrote. Some friends read them and said they felt seen. Others said they felt comforted. No one said they were weird anymore. She realized Hugot had quietly crossed the border, not as a joke style, but as an emotional philosophy. And she carried it carefully. Because now she understood something important. Hugot wasn't meant to be loud. It didn't demand attention. It worked best when it was subtle, when it slipped into conversations unnoticed and softened the edges of pain. She still laughed at Filipino Hugot videos online. She still missed the way Filipinos could joke about heartbreak with a grin and a shrug. But she no longer felt frustrated that her friends didn't fully understand it. They didn't need to. They were starting to feel it. And that was enough. Because Hugot, she realized, wasn't about being Filipino. It was about being human. About acknowledging that everyone carries something heavy, and choosing to smile anyway, not because the weight disappears, but because you're strong enough to carry it. And in that quiet realization, she smiled to herself, not because it was funny, but because it felt true. By the time summer settled into the city, she no longer noticed when Hugot slipped into her life. It wasn't something she performed anymore. It was simply the way she spoke, the way she listened, the way she allowed emotions to exist without rushing them away. It had become natural. She realized this one evening while walking home with a friend after a long day. The streets were warm, the sky still holding on to the last traces of daylight, and the conversation drifted easily from work to dreams, to the quiet fears people usually keep to themselves. Her friend stopped mid-sentence and laughed softly, shaking her head. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," she said. "I never talk about these things." She smiled, gentle and unforced. "Maybe you just felt safe enough to say it," she replied. Her friend looked at her, thoughtful. "You've changed," she said. "You don't push people to explain everything anymore. You just let things be." That was when she understood how deeply Filipino culture, especially Hugot, had shaped her. In the Philippines, emotions were not interrogated. They were acknowledged. You didn't need perfect words or logical explanations. Sometimes a simple line, half joke and half truth, was enough to say everything that mattered. She carried that with her now. Her Ukrainian friends had begun to do the same, though none of them called it Hugot. They joked more gently. They teased less cruelly. They allowed sadness to exist in conversations without immediately trying to fix it or dismiss it. Laughter became warmer, less sharp. Silence became more comfortable. One night, during a gathering that felt almost too ordinary to remember, someone made a quiet joke about missing someone who never came back. No one laughed right away. Then someone smiled. Another nodded. And then there was soft laughter, not mocking, not awkward, just understanding. She felt her chest tighten, not with sadness, but with recognition. This was it. This was what she had been trying to explain all along. Hugot didn't need punchlines, it needed honesty. She thought back to the Philippines, to late-night conversations on plastic chairs, to laughter during rainstorms, to jokes whispered between friends who had all loved and lost in different ways. Filipinos didn't pretend heartbreak didn't hurt. They just refused to let it isolate them. Pain was shared, and in sharing it became lighter. In Ukraine, she had grown up believing strength meant composure. It meant handling things privately. It meant not letting emotions spill into public spaces. There was dignity in restraint, and she still respected that. But Hugot had taught her something new. That vulnerability, when wrapped in humor and warmth, could be a form of strength too. She didn't replace one culture with another. She blended them. She learned when to be quiet and when to laugh, when to speak plainly and when to soften words with a smile, when to let humor carry pain, and when to let silence do the work instead. One afternoon, she caught herself smiling at a sad memory instead of pushing it away. She didn't feel embarrassed by it. She didn't feel weak. She felt whole. That was when she knew Hugot had fully become part of her. Not as a Filipino joke style, but as a way of seeing life. She stopped trying to translate Hugot for others. She stopped defending it. She stopped explaining it. She let people experience it through her presence, through how she listened, how she joked, how she made space for feelings without making them heavy. Some friends adopted it, some didn't. That was okay. Because Hugot, she realized, was never meant to be universal. It was meant to be intimate. A shared glance, a soft laugh, a line that sounded simple but carried a lifetime of emotion underneath. She still missed the Philippines. She missed the warmth, the noise, the way laughter spilled freely into the streets. But she no longer felt like she left something behind. She brought it with her. And in quiet moments, over coffee, during long walks, in conversations that drifted into honesty, she felt it working. Slowly, gently, changing the emotional rhythm of her life. Her Ukrainian friends might never fully understand Hugot jokes the way Filipinos do, but they understood her. And maybe that was the point all along. Because Hugot wasn't about being funny. It was about being brave enough to say, "This hurt me," and kind enough to smile while saying it. And in a world that often demanded people choose between strength and softness, she had learned, through laughter, through culture, through a language that didn't quite translate, that it was possible to be both.